How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Mother Sponge 5000, and in this video we're going to focus on what likely will become Tropical Storm Agatha in the Eastern Pacific and determine if it'll move up northward into the Gulf of Mexico and potentially become a threat to the United States. And we'll also talk about our next potential tropical cyclone threat just to the east of Florida. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. Make sure to like if you like this video, and make sure to turn on post notifications if you want to see even more weather-related content. So let's begin by taking a look at the current water vapor imagery for Invest 91E, which is likely to become Tropical Storm Agatha within the next 24 to 48 hours. And as you can see, compared to yesterday, there's a lot more thunderstorm activity, especially closer to the center of circulation, which is located right around this point. Yesterday, there was pretty much no real visible evidence that there was any sort of thunderstorm activity occurring around center of circulation, as it looked completely dry around the center of circulation yesterday. But now we're starting to see those pop-ups of thunderstorms around the center of circulation, which is required to lower the pressure just enough to where the winds could increase to the point where it could be considered a tropical depression or tropical storm. And also a stronger low pressure system enhances the rotation, which would allow it to become a tropical storm within the next few hours most likely. And we're seeing a lot more thunderstorm activity as well outside of the center of circulation, where we're seeing thunderstorm bands develop throughout southern Mexico into Guatemala and Belize. You guys are experiencing a multitude of thunderstorms and heavy rain at this time, so you need to watch out for the potential flooding if you're around the Central American region. But yeah, we're seeing a lot more thunderstorm activity. So so this becoming Tropical Storm Agatha is very likely as a result of this, since the pressure is gonna be low enough as a result of how much convection is going on, that we're going to see those winds increase to the point where it'll be considered tropical storm status most likely within the next 48 hours. Pretty much inevitable at this point within the next 5 days that this will develop into a tropical storm. So taking a look at the current water temperatures over that area, you see that water temperatures are not only warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development, but they're warm enough to the point where we're more likely to see a tropical storm or tropical cyclone in general develop a lot faster than if the temperatures, let's say, were in the low 80-degree range, because where the center of circulation is located at right now, it's right around this area. The sea surface temperatures are hovering around 31 to 32 degrees Celsius, which is in the mid to upper 80s, which is more than enough for a rapid amount of development to occur with this storm, because of the amount of energy that these very warm sea surface temperature waters are bringing to the atmosphere. So as a result, we're seeing this storm form a lot faster than what a typical tropical cyclone, how long a typical tropical cyclone would take. So as a result, it seems likely that a tropical cyclone will form over the next 48 hours, and these extremely warm sea surface temperature ocean waters, combined with the fact that they're above average for this time of the year, is definitely in helping it strengthen a lot faster. Now, taking a look at the current chance that the Storm Prediction Center is giving for this storm, a 90% chance of tropical cyclone formation within the next 5 days and a 70% chance within the next 48 hours. So again, it's likely to become Tropical Storm Agatha, and there is that possibility that this could move northward into the Gulf of Mexico and potentially pose a threat along the Gulf Coast states, but I'll get into that in just a little bit. So taking a look now at the what the GFS model is stating right now. So right now there is a plethora of moisture surrounding just south of Mexico, Guatemala, and a lot of these Central American countries. And of course, this moisture will eventually converge around the center circulation located just to the south of Mexico and will form into Tropical Storm Agatha. And if we were to continue to move forward, you see that there isn't a lot of dry air that's going to hinder this storm from developing. It's going to be over extremely warm Eastern Pacific ocean temperature water, and you see that the dry air is pretty much exclusive to the northern Gulf of Mexico, not really getting into the center of circulation. However, there is maybe that possibility that maybe a little bit of dry air gets in there, but I'd say for the most part, moisture won't be a concern with Tropical Storm Agatha, at least within the very near future. If I were to take look forward, you see that the GFS model is saying that this low pressure system will of course weaken once it interacts with Mexico, and we're gonna see we're also going to see this storm pretty much meander over, I'd say, the Yucatan Peninsula before it moves eastward, and it could re-strengthen out into the Atlantic, which could maybe become Tropical Storm Alex in the Atlantic. And if we were to take a look just to the east of North Carolina, we see another feature that could develop into a tropical storm as well, that the GFS model, the latest GFS model run, has been persistent on as of recently. So that's at least something to keep in mind. But taking a look at the conditions surrounding the low pressure system, you see that it isn't very good for the most part, as I'd almost describe these conditions as somewhat hostile, because we do see quite a bit of dry air on the southern side of this potential tropical cyclone, which definitely could hinder it. And it's not only dry air that could be the issue for this low pressure system that's expected to form just off of Florida. It's also going to need to deal with a relatively high amount of wind shear. It's going to be in the small area where wind shear may be just light enough for this low pressure system to potentially develop into a tropical storm. But you see that there's extremely strong wind shear just to the south side of this low pressure system, and relatively moderate to strong wind shear just to the north side of this low pressure system. So it's going to need to be in a very specific area for it to have a good possibility of developing. The GFS model wants to develop it despite the hostile conditions surrounding it, and it's not only the wind shear that's going to be a problem. The sea surface temperatures will also go against its favor a little bit, because the Gulf Stream at this point of the year is not entirely above 80, or at least this area, a large portion of that area isn't over the 80-degree sea surface temperature range just yet, as we're still very early in the hurricane season, just approaching June now. So a large area of the sea surface of the ocean here hasn't even exceeded the 80-degree threshold, which won't go for its favor, that's for certain. But we could still see that possibility where baroclinic influences could maybe help develop this low pressure system, maybe to a subtropical low pressure system, since it won't be entirely tropical. But at this point, the chance is still low that this low pressure system develops into a tropical storm just off the southeast coast. But it's at least something to be aware of when the GFS model does want to develop at least some sort of low pressure system just off the southeast coast within 6 days, which is still far out, but it's at least something to be aware about. It isn't like something that's 10 days out. That would be at that point, I guess at that point from the computer models. But going back to Tropical Storm Agatha, which is like the form just south of Mexico, you see that the wind shear will be light enough to where this will strengthen, while it won't be under a completely shear-free environment 100%, because of course we do see a strong amount of wind shear just to the north of this storm. It's going to avoid it for the most part, to where its center circulation will primarily be structured just enough to where it'll likely strengthen just south of Mexico and could make landfall at around hurricane status. But where we do see the pressure drop quite a bit down to 948 millibars, which is definitely a concern just off the southern coast of Mexico. But there's still unfortunately, there's still a decent amount of uncertainty today, just like there was yesterday, because the European model still is favoring a track well further westward and a much weaker tropical cyclone just south Mexico, which definitely does make it far more uncertain where this will make landfall. It's definitely closer than it was yesterday. I'd say the European model was just a little bit further westward yesterday, and the GFS model was a little bit further eastward, but now we're starting to see the computer models come a little bit closer. So it seems like this sort of vicinity of Mexico should receive a landfall, so make sure to keep that in mind. The better case scenario for Mexico would of course be the European model because it's much weaker. It doesn't really go below 990 millibars, which is equivalent to right around tropical storm to maybe low-end hurricane status. But the GFS model wants to almost strengthen this to major hurricane status, which is somewhat of a concern. But we're going to need to wait and see how much shear there will be, the amount of dry air there will be. But at this point, I'd say it's definitely likely a hurricane will develop. And there's a good possibility a hurricane will make landfall somewhere on the southern coast of Mexico. So you want to pay close attention if you're around the Mexico area. But how about beyond Mexico? Could this impact the United States? Well, let's take a look at the precipitation forecasts for regarding this tropical storms to really give a good idea of where the low pressure system will be located. So if I were to continue to move forward, you see that this low pressure system will meander over the Yucatan Peninsula, and we're going to see a weakness in ridging as a result of this in the middle of the Atlantic, as a result of this trough pretty much breaking apart this ridging in the middle of the Atlantic. So that will create sort of an area where the low pressure will break free and move to the east, which would avoid the Gulf states for the most part. So let me actually show you guys the 500 millibar height anomaly, because that gives a good idea of where the ridges are building and where there's weakness in ridging. So if I were to move forward, you see that the storm's located right here. We do have that strong ridge steering this storm to the west, but we're going to see a weakness in ridging in the middle of the Atlantic. And this weakness in ridging will occur right around the eastern half of the United States. So it has a free area to where it'll move northeastward. It's a stark contrast. So when we take a look at the European model, because it expects the ridging to be a little bit more stronger, which would linger this storm right around the Gulf of Mexico. And by the way, both storms are at least developing something somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. With the remnants of Agatha moving into the Gulf of Mexico, they're at least bringing a decent amount of energy, which is something to be concerned about, because you see that we do still see a formable low pressure system just north of the Yucatan Peninsula of about the 240 hour mark, which is still super far. But even if we were to move a little bit earlier, you see as early as the 7-day mark, there's some energy located in the southern portion of the Gulf of Mexico, which definitely raised a concern that this storm will reform somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. And the GFS model also agrees with this, where we do see development from the remnants of Agatha as early as the 6-day mark, where just off the coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, we do see a formable low pressure system form. And the GFS model wants to take it northeastward, and we do see this is at this point definitely a tropical storm, and it's just off the coast of Florida, while the European model at this same point is still meandering over the Gulf of Mexico. So it's at least something to keep in mind, that there's some energy that's going to transfer over from the remnants of Agatha into the Gulf of Mexico into next week. So there's at least something to be aware of along the Gulf Coast. There hasn't really been much developments from yesterday regarding the certainty of Tropical Storm Alex developing in the Gulf of Mexico. Just really more of the same, which in fact might make it more a little bit more certain, not by much. It's still highly uncertain, but the fact that both computer models are expecting at least some sort of energy to transfer over into the Gulf of Mexico, despite the amount of runs that have been going through over the past several days, might show that there might be at least some sort of truth that we could see a rebirth of a tropical cyclone somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. So still a lot to determine. We need to determine how much wind shear there'll be, the amount of dry air, because because those factors definitely are gonna play a role in terms of whether this will develop or not. So we're just gonna need to wait and see. Taking a look at the relative humidity, you see that there's gonna be quite a bit of dry air in the Gulf of Mexico, which could hinder it a little bit. Taking a look at what the European model is forecasting when it comes to the relative humidity, still there's going to be a decent amount of dry air as well throughout the Gulf of Mexico. It's a lot drier than normal throughout the western half of the United States, so we're going to see more stable air throughout the Gulf of Mexico, at least early on this hurricane season, as well as a stronger amount of wind shear. So that is definitely going against its favor. But the fact that they both develop it at least sometime in the future shows that there might be some truth to a forecast. But for now, at least be aware throughout the Gulf Coast states. Now, taking a look at the sea surface temperatures, I want to show you guys the Atlantic sea surface temperatures because of the low pressure system I was just talking to you guys about that could maybe develop into Tropical Storm Alex just off the Florida coast, what the GFS model wants to develop into Tropical Storm Alex. You see that not a large area of the just off the southeast coast is experiencing sea surface temperatures above 80 degrees. Above 80 degrees is above 26 degrees Celsius, and we do see that this storm could move into slightly cooler waters, into 25 to 24 degrees Celsius water. So it's going at that point, it's going to need some baroclinic influences to maintain the strength of this low pressure system as it moves northward, to where it'll attain some subtropical characteristics along the way if this were to develop. But the good news is that the European model isn't developing really anything, but the fact that GFS model is developing something as early as 6 days from now just off the southeast coast, it's at least something to be aware of as well. Now, taking a look at what the GEFS model is forecasting, at least the ensemble members, what they're forecasting, you see that a lot of them want to take this very far eastward, but don't be fooled by this map entirely because it's just the GFS ensemble members. When we take a look at the GPS ensemble members, you see that a lot of them want to take it further westward. So still a decent amount of uncertainty regarding the track forecast. Really all depends on whether or not there's going to be a weakness in ridging in the middle of the Atlantic, but we're just going to need to wait and see. Taking a look at the model intensity guidance, you see that majority of them want to strengthen this into a hurricane, and I noticed this the model intensity guidance typically does underestimate how strong tropical cyclones could be, so it could be even stronger than what the ensemble members, most of the ensemble members are agreeing on right now. So we could maybe potentially see a major hurricane. That's not out of the possibility. So that means something to keep in mind if you're right around Mexico. Now, take a look at my forecasts of these next two potential tropical cyclone concerns in the future. You see that I think Tropical Storm Agatha, what will likely become Tropical Storm Agatha, will move either far eastward or very far westward. Still a high amount of uncertainty. And taking a look just off the southeast coast, if there were to be a low pressure system that does develop into a tropical storm like the GFS model is forecasting, it'll move in this general direction. And like I said, not all this area is has sea surface temperatures above 80 degrees, so it's gonna need some baroclinic influences and it's gonna need to attain some subtropical characteristics to really strengthen if it were to move northward. But even then, it seems like conditions at this point seem too hostile for just because of the amount of dry air and wind shear. It'll be under, it's gonna need to develop under a very small area to really develop. So I'd still say the chance of this developing is still low, while for the Tropical Storm Agatha, that's pretty much likely to form. And I'll even go as far as to say Hurricane Agatha is likely to form just south of Mexico. However, going into the Gulf of Mexico, that's when things become uncertain. But since both of the computer models are agreeing that some sort of low pressure system out of the Tropical Storm Agatha will redevelop, it's at least something to be concerned about in the Gulf of Mexico state. So make sure to stay aware, and I'll keep you guys updated. But anyways, guys, I thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.